Thanks very much for the warm welcome. My name's Alex Benjamin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Lendful. As Pindy said, we are an online lender, consumer lender. Thanks very much for inviting me along to talk tonight, and it's great to be here with so many fantastic other entrepreneurs and people who are part of startups. I was asked to just share a couple of lessons learned. I'll just give a quick background on myself. I worked actually for an investment bank for about 10 years in Australia. I received VC funding 2 years ago to move to Canada and start an online lending platform. I got a $20,000 investment to start here. I moved here on the startup entrepreneurs visa program. I've subsequently raised over $5 million in equity. I've got a $50 million line of credit to lend out. I've got 14 staff and I'm based in Toronto, Vancouver and Montreal. So just a couple of lessons to share, and I want to keep it pretty high level so it's memorable and you walk away feeling like you remember some things that I've said tonight. Learn how to use Google Slides if you don't already. They're fantastic. So a couple of key things that I often think about from a startup CEO's perspective. These things really stand out for me time and time again. When I'm coming back to sort of core principles, how do I make something work? The thing that I ask time and time again is, can you prove demand before you build supply? And I'm sure many of us probably experience this on a day-to-day basis, and we've all done this, but I had a startup, I've had one startup before which failed, and I spent too much time making it look fantastic. I didn't actually get out there and push it into the market and get a real sense of what do people actually think of this? I built a TripAdvisor for aged care homes in Australia. I spent 10 months just playing with the photos, building the content, and I left it too late. So second time round, I got my product straight into the market as quickly as I possibly could, started trying to drive traffic and really started to see what the demand was like, and then could easily go ahead and raise some money. The second thing that I think is really key for me, which has helped me grow as a person but also grow as a business leader, is working with uncertainty. Running a business is uncertain. 2 years on, it continues to be uncertain, but I think if you can get your head right and get good people around you, you can lessen the uncertainty and it can make the journey a lot more enjoyable and be successful. So I'm just going to share 3 key things that I work on every day, which I thought might be helpful and interesting. Customer discovery, founder psychology, and get good at asking people for money. So let me just give you a quick example with customer discovery. This is something that I really was forced very early on to get onto with my investors. That is talking to people. With Lendful, I arrived here on the 4th of March 2015. I spent 3 weeks cold calling people, asking people what customer acquisition costs were for their lending platforms. I never had anyone say no to me except other Australians. So I spoke to, they were like, no mate, I'm not giving you my business model. But this was key to me building a business case to raise my first $1 million. So I could understand how you can make money from lending money. It's very easy to see on a 5-year schedule, if you charge a fixed interest rate, what your revenue is going to be. Actually trying to understand what the expense line is a little bit trickier. So I regularly employ this technique of cold calling people and asking them, what did you experience? What did you do? What were the costs associated with your business early on? And I think this is something that's really put me in good stead to actually have good data that I can talk to investors always about. Well, actually, I know I spoke to 182 people. They told me. The second piece, which is critical, is having a good mindset. And again, I talked about having a good frame of mind earlier on, and I think here there's many things that you can talk to. I've picked 3 things here which I think really work well for me. It's the pre-game. It's always being prepared. So practicing my conversations with people, understanding what the other side of the conversation might, the other person in the conversation might be thinking, doing some research on what they've done in business, or if I'm talking to them about raising money, trying to understand what are the investment criteria that they would make an investment decision on. The other thing that's really important to me is being authentic, so vulnerable. Not always having the answers is okay. Showing up to a meeting and just saying, look, I'm not sure what the answer is. I'll go and find out. But what I can tell you is that I found these other pieces of information which are probably going to lead me to a similar sort of outcome. I do stuff. I don't just sit there. I go and get stuff done. I had my first 6 months, I was trying to get debt. You know, that's a key thing to lending money. You need some money to lend out. I kept going. I asked this one guy, he's the CEO of a bank in Ottawa. They're called Alterna Bank. I asked him 3 times for a debt facility and he said no 3 times. I went back a 4th time. He gave me a $15 million debt facility, which basically sealed the deal, and we kicked off 2016 with access to debt funding. The other important thing is to remember that it's not just you. You do have people around you. Get a really good tribe, get a really good crew of people who understand you. Leaving Macquarie, leaving the investment bank, I was on the trading floor for 9 years. A lot of people are like, what the hell are you doing? You've got a great life, you've got steady income, what are you doing? And I think the thing that you have to remember is you've got to find people who have a similar mindset to you, who really want to see you succeed. That may not be immediately your family members, it may not be your friends, but you will start to find people who are your champions. And I think I cultivate a group. These are just my employees, my investors, family, my wife. These are people that you can rely on, that you work with, that help you all the time. The third point I make, and it's my last one, which is do get good at asking for money. People have the best idea. If you can't raise money, there's not much you can do, other than if you're making money straight away. A lot of us do need to raise money. What I would suggest is practice and really do research on who you're going to speak to. One of the things I mentioned before was pre-game, really trying to understand what the investor wants out of investing in you and in your product. 80% of the time for me, it's about the person sees an opportunity working with me. But as I grow, it's very much about product market fit. Have I got it right? We've just closed our 3rd round of financing. As the valuations increase, the stakes get higher. I do have to do so much more work before I go and raise money. I flew down to Australia 2 weeks ago for 3 days to meet with a new fund who just cut a big check for our recent raise. I spent 3 weeks doing research on this group, understanding how they've invested previously, so that I went there, I didn't want to fail, and we succeeded, which was great. That's it for me. Do have fun. That's one thing I wanted to say, but it is a hell of a lot of fun starting your own business. I have lots to share. I'd love to contribute more to the community. I spent a lot of time on an aeroplane, spending time in Toronto and Montreal, but I do live here in Vancouver. The community is fantastic. Connect with me via email, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I'll be around this evening. So thank you very much for having me and letting me share. Anyone got any questions? Please.
Sounded like you've been sort of commissioned to move here. I take it that's not really the case.
No. Sure. The banks here are pretty ordinary. Having grown up in Australia, very similar economy, very similar banking structure. 4 large banks. Australians are the most profitable banks in the world. Canadians are the 2nd most profitable. Fee structure is very high. There's a large opportunity to disintermediate. I worked on it, looked at it for about 10 months before I came. Macquarie Bank, who I worked for, had a presence here for 7 years. They moved out of here after having a loss. So there were lots of lessons learned, and actually quite a few of the guys that were in the business here came on board as advisors, and so I realised that the only way I could really make the model work would be on balance sheet lending, and so I borrowed at wholesale and try and sell at retail, basically. Always being able to build iteratively so that I don't go too far to realise that, well, okay, we are now running in the wrong direction. Our lifetime value is on a ratio to CAC of 14:1, so I feel pretty comfortable in terms of where we are, in terms of what our profitability can be like, but we're still learning. It's still very early. Yeah.
So Whistler didn't have anything to do with...
Do you know what? I've been there about twice. But
You feel right at home.
I know. The Australian accent sounds so bad when you're overseas. Yeah, look, the investment is here in Vancouver. Actually, that's where I secured it. But I actually found a lot of the talent in Montreal and Toronto. We're based here, and we love living here, and plan to stay. So it works well remotely. Did you have one? No, sorry.
I have a question.
Please.
Could you elaborate on what pre-pay means for you? What that but what that entails?
Sure.
Because as a salesperson, I tend to pre-pay a lot.
Yep.
But sometimes you're a little over-prepared.
Sure.
What's that fine balance?
For me, I have grown up ocean swimming, actually. So I've done a lot of long distance swimming, sort of 4 kilometres or more into swell. And I know that you can be incredibly nervous. So what I would try and do is go and swim 5 or 6, so that I know that when I get in the ocean that there's going to be current, there's going to be waves. I'm not going to drown. And for me, that's the same in preparation for work. Put in the extra work, go harder. You know, you're going to get rejected hundreds of times when you're asking people for money, and you just have to keep going. Like, there's no other alternative. So I exercise a lot, but then I translate that into my work and how I prepare for what I do. And it just helps me to accelerate and keep growing. I hope that sort of explains it.
It definitely does. Any other questions?
Please.
There's one in the back.
How do you? Right. Yeah, yes, you can. I think it was actually, maybe, was that quoting what I wrote, Ian? But yeah, look, to the point of my first experience with a startup, I proved supply because I thought my idea was wonderful, but none of the customers did. So, yes. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Sarah, thanks so much.